Ba-da-da-dum. Thank you, Joel Felsenstein, Rockstar X. You can see right down here, Rockstar X is one of our newest sponsors. We thank you so much for sponsoring, for being here, for being the great human being that you are, Joel Felsenstein and Rockstar X. If you don't know them, get connected today. He is doing incredible work with the autistic and neurodiverse community. Different, not less. So bravo to you, my friend. I appreciate you. And thank you for that amazing intro, outro video. We also want to recognize the Hounds of Business community. Thank you, Mike Asher-Brainer, and all of the people in the Hounds for sponsoring us. We appreciate the work that you do and how you shine. Today, who do I have back? You might have seen her a couple days ago. You might recognize this face. Sheena Lance Nold is in the house again today. If you didn't hear my intro for her last week, well, not last week, 2 days ago, then I will tell you, she's a mom. She's an incredible businesswoman. She is the founder and CEO of SLN Coaching and Consulting. She is also our board vice president. Give it up, Sheena.
Thank you, Ken.
All right. And today we are talking about EQ. I can't tell you, I can't even remember the first time that I heard EQ. And I thought somebody had actually just like they mispronounced, they didn't spell IQ correctly. And I remember like, okay, what is EQ? What is that? What does it mean? So I want to start out with that. So for anybody in the audience, anybody that joins us on Team Replay, we still love all our Team Replay people. Thank you so much for making our YouTube channel and other social places so fantastic. Thank you for coming. But what is EQ, Sheena?
Well, so what I think is interesting about EQ is it's become such a buzzword. So I think people throw it around a lot. And to me, EQ is really the skills that encompass your ability to connect with others. That's not a dictionary definition. It's how I think of it. And that kind of ties into, the 4 keys that I want to share today. But as you were saying, it's kind of like every other word. Like I feel like in the work environment, we used to hear a lot about soft skills, and now more so than soft skills, we're hearing about EQ. But it's not necessarily the way that I hear it explained or talked about. It's not necessarily holistic. It's more like we have a business objective and we hear that EQ might help us with that. So like, let's maybe look into this thing.
Wow.
Good, but it's not the whole story, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I, like I said, I remember hearing it for the first time and thinking to myself, somebody made a mistake. And then as they're explaining it to me and I'm going, oh, well, that's a good thing to have. I think that's, that's what all leaders should have. Yeah. More and more and more. Yes, you are absolutely correct. We hear people talking about it and throwing it around like a hashtag that's just worn out. Mm-hmm. And I think the incredible thing when you really dial it in, and I liked your definition and I like where you're going. I think really, emotional intelligence is multifaceted. And really is about, as you say, that well-rounded or holistic leader that is empathetic and has compassion, understands the value of people, but also understands how to get the most from people because they uplift them. Yeah. So this will be really cool today to dive in and talk about these 4 things. So without any further ado, let's hit it. What's number 1?
Well, before we do that, though, I do want to make I don't want to make any assumptions in this, so I do want to just call out EQ and EI are not the same thing, right? So we're talking about emotional intelligence. EQ is how emotional intelligence is typically measured. So it's used a lot of times interchangeably, and we're using it somewhat interchangeably tonight. But I just want to make that distinction.
That's good.
Okay, so the 4 keys. And this is, I mean, I could talk about this for days. So like, I try to condense it down to like, what's something that we can talk about in, you know, a short series and take away some tangible tactical tips. So number 1, EQ is comprised of learnable skills. And I think the reason that's so important is it's not an, you know, either you have it or you don't. It may be easier for some people to increase their EQ than others, but there are lots of skills like presence, like active listening, like you mentioned before, compassion, right? Empathy. There are a lot of skills that we can cultivate and build that will increase our EQ. Number 2, EQ is more than talking about feelings. And I know this is great for all the leaders that cringe when they hear EQ. You don't have to just ask people how they're feeling all the time. I think that one of the most powerful things you can do is pay attention to not just what people are saying, pay attention to their body language, pay attention to changes in their demeanor. If you see someone smiling a lot at work, and you notice that, and I'm talking more in a workplace, this is relevant anywhere, right? You could use things at home, which is another point I have that I'll get to later. But you know, it's tuning into that and just paying attention to those people around you, and then noticing and naming that. Hey, Chason, I noticed that you're not smiling as much as you usually do, and I'm wondering, you know, is something up? Is there anything you want to share with me? And maybe they want to share and maybe they don't, but you're really just opening the door. And what I found is even if they don't want to share something, they notice that you noticed, right? And that means a lot to people.
I didn't say anything about the first one, but because I didn't really want to interrupt you, but I do want to say something here. There's really 2 parts to that. Mm-hmm. One, it lets people know that you notice. So from a standpoint of, okay, this person cares about me as a human being, but also it lets them know because they may not realize this is how they're presenting themselves to other people. So I always think about that, like, okay, maybe they just don't, maybe something's going on. They're really not ready to talk about it, but they don't realize they're projecting. Yeah. So that's a huge thing.
Well, and I think you bring up a great point there too, because it may simply be that they have a big project, right? And they're distracted and that's it. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you told me that. No, I just have this deadline coming up. And so, you know, I'm just kind of focused on that. And then you kind of clear the air too, because what happens when we don't say something, we typically make assumptions and we think that that person is mad at us, or we think that, you know, they're a jerk, or we think something, right? We make up these assumptions. So yeah, I love that you mentioned that.
Well, I think it's cool too that in that course of, as you said before, you're opening the door for conversation. So maybe, oh no, I'm not. There's nothing going on. You know, everything's fine. I just have this big project. That now their door is open. How can I help you? What can I do? Is there any tools that you need? Is there a way that I can support you? Now you know, again, in all of these scenarios, that continued conversation around how can I be of support to you?
Yeah.
And when we take that approach as leaders, we're just raising the bar for what we can do to develop that team.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
What's number 3?
Number 3 is presence can elevate EQ. So, you know, I'm a certified coach, and one of the major components in the coaching programs that I've done and passing my coaching certification has to do with presence. There's entire competency around presence as a coach. And that's where you notice those things that we talked about before, right? If you're not present, if you're constantly thinking about what happened in the past or what happened in the future, what you have the next hour, and you're not present in that moment, I can tell you, I had to prepare for this conversation today because we talked about this before. Like, I had a really busy day today, and I had to kind of sit with myself and just be for a few minutes to make sure that I could show up and really be present for this conversation today. Otherwise, I was going to be thinking about everything else that, is to come the rest of the evening. And
Yeah.
so presence, I think, especially as a leader, and here's the telltale, if you're present, is your phone on? Are you paying? Because studies show, I wish I could cite the actual study, but studies show that just having your phone on a table drastically decreases connection, even if you're not
Interesting.
looking at it. I'll try to find the actual study and get you the citation for it. But yeah, just having your phone out. So I should probably not keep my phone right here. When you got two small kids, you gotta have it somewhere. But yeah, as much as possible. So what can you do? Because I recognize that's a part of it too, right? I don't have a smartwatch, and that's probably why, is because I would find it incredibly distracting. But if you have a smartwatch, turning off notifications on your phone when you're not busy, or if there is a situation, if you have kids, if you're a caregiver, something like that, and you do need to kind of be on call and notified, letting people know to call you twice. That way, like it's an emergency. It's something where you do need to answer the phone. You do need to kind of pay attention to that versus just the, email notifications and whatever else notifications we get. So yeah, presence can definitely elevate EQ.
I have to trust me. My notifications thing will go firing off. It's insanity. So I have a thing. I had to manually do it for the show, but at night I have a thing where it goes into sleep mode, because otherwise all night long it'll, because there's partners in 5 different countries.
Yes.
And sometimes they forget, Chason's normally up really late because they've communicated with me at 11, 12 o'clock my time. And Jody's like, what the hell are you doing?
Sorry, Jody.
And yeah, I've gotten busted sometimes, like nothing, I'm not doing anything, lights on, the whole room's lit up from this bright light. So I have to put it in sleep mode because I can't turn my brain off. Like I literally, I'll hear the beep and I'll be like a trained, monkey, like, oh, what's up? Well, I gotta do it. So.
Okay. So there's one point that I want to make that is kind of on top of that. More so in the workplace, but I think it can be helpful personally too, is setting boundaries as well. If you want to be present, you have to set boundaries, especially as a leader. So one of my keys to this that I work with leaders a lot, if they struggle with setting boundaries, or they're like, I need to be there for my team and I don't want to tell my team no because they're going to think that I'm not there for them. Then one of the things that I say is yes. And hey, do you have some time to meet? Yes, I can do it tomorrow at 11 a.m. How does that work for you? So like say yes, but give something that works within your timeline instead of moving everything around for that person, unless obviously it's an emergency or something like that. So I think setting some boundaries. I think the other thing is when you set boundaries, it gives your team permission to set boundaries. So I saw this, I think I saw it on LinkedIn or Instagram the other day, and it was like an email from the CEO where it was like, I recognize my working hours are different than other people's working hours. Feel free to respond during your work hours, right? So like you can send the email at 11 p.m. if that's when you're working, but you're not expecting somebody else to. Now, I don't encourage a lot of leaders to do that, like totally outside of work hours. But I think acknowledging that and just letting people know that, like, you can set some boundaries to maximize your ability to lead, because ultimately that's your job, right? You need to put yourself in the best position to lead your people.
Yep. Absolutely. But it's easy. I mean, I can tell you it's easy to get off the rail and just be like, whoop, we're just gonna, next thing you know, it's 14, 16-hour days and you're like, okay, what have I done?
Yeah.
And I can honestly say that presence part needs to happen in all the areas of your life. It should not just be when you show up to work. It should be in your regular life as well. Something that my wife is going to type here in a minute going, mm-hmm.
Well, and it increases your joy and satisfaction in everything that you're doing too, right? If you're just going through the motions and you're just kind of going from meeting to meeting or hour to hour or whatever the nature of your work is. And then you transition, whether that's like leaving your home office and, you know, going upstairs like I do, or driving home from the office or whatever it is. And then it's like you get home and then you're straight into task mode once you get home. Your level of joy, your level of satisfaction, personally and professionally, is going to be way lower than if you're present and in the moment and recognizing, like, how can I bring my best self to this situation?
True. So true. All right. What's number 4?
Number 4, EQ is an elevator to enhanced relationships personally and professionally. Sorry, that's kind of a long one.
I'm just making sure I can actually type.
And the reason why is everything that we just talked about, right? When you're present with your partner or you're present with someone on your team that you lead, when you are present in those situations, that relationship is naturally going to be improved. You're going to be tuned into them, like we talked about earlier, of what that looks like. It also, when we talk about the skills, when you are, if you think about times when you have been the most compassionate, it's probably when you've been the most present, right? If you have someone who, if you have a friend or a family member or someone who comes to you with really hard news, and you're in the middle of 27 tasks and you have deadlines that you're trying to hit and you have all these things going on, you might be like, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. But in your head, you're really like, oh my gosh, I don't know that I can be here for this person right now because I have all these things going on. And you probably won't say that, but in your head, you're just like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to like be here for them? And so you try to do it all, but they know that you're trying to do it all and they don't feel you there, right? Like they don't feel your presence in that situation. And so when we focus on that piece of it, all of those skills, the compassion, the empathy, the active, I had a yoga teacher once call it athletic listening. And I thought that was so beautiful.
Oh, wow.
I've been an athlete my whole life. So it's like thinking about being an athlete and the intricacies of being an athlete and thinking about athletic listening, I think is really beautiful. And when we take all those skills and put them together and commit to growing those skills. So I will tell you one thing that I've had to work on a lot is listening. I like to talk and, you know, I like learning things and I like sharing what I learn. So one of the things that I worked on a lot to improve my EQ was when I went into meetings, I would not be the first person to talk. I would let other people talk first so that so that their voice could be heard, so that I could hear their ideas, so that they could bring their perspectives forward. And then after a few people shared, I might share, but really just creating space and that's practicing that skill. And when I thought about it as practicing a skill, it was much easier for me to do because I was intentional about it.
Yeah. What do they say? Something like it takes 20 days of continually doing something to form a habit, to make that happen. And there's other people who have different opinions on that, but the point is you got to consistently do something over a period of time. And
we can do a whole conversation on habits.
Work the muscles. You got to work the muscles, man.
Yeah. And it's not as simple as like, I know what to do, I just don't do it. It's not that simple.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
So I want to go back through. So we have 4.
Mm-hmm.
And so number 1 is EQ is comprised of learnable skills. Mm-hmm. And we kind of ran through that one, but I want to mention this again. So the first thing is EQ is comprised of learnable skills. You mentioned a couple of things, but I really think that one of the things that I keep getting in conversations with people over and over and over again is the lack of understanding. And it comes from a lot of different places, but the lack of understanding by leaders that when you give your team the ability to upskill, reskill, cross-train, learn, grow where they are, bloom where they are. Because not everyone learns the same way. Not everybody likes and wants to advance and learn. So allowing people in that holistic environment, in a psychologically safe space, to learn as they can and as they want to, and take those learnable skills. Because I really have gotten to where I detest the word soft skills. I think they're power skills. I really honestly feel like all of those things that you do on a daily basis that we used to call that, and everybody would chime in about that, same as, EQ being thrown around. Everybody would throw around soft skills. And I think it's power skills. I think it's how you teach people learnable, actionable power skills to enhance their ability to grow within your company and in their life. So that to me is a huge, huge one. And I love that you said that first. The second one that you said was EQ is more than talking about feelings. All of that mischatter that we see with throwing EQ around seems to me to be related in some ways around EQ is fuzzy. EQ is this kumbaya, warm, settling thing, and it's not an action. And I feel like that's really where the mistake is. That we don't realize it's an action. It's not just us grouping together and, hey, today on Friday, we're going to talk about how we're all doing. Well,
Well, and I think what's really interesting about that is with the leaders that I've worked with, I've worked with a few leaders who have received negative feedback from a supervisor or from their team or from whoever. And it is fuzzy, right? It is not clear what the feedback is. They don't connect well with their team. What does that mean, right? And so when we look at all those learnable skills of EQ, active listening, compassion, presence, empathy, like if we actually started there to say, okay, what is it specifically that they're not showing to their team, or that they're not, that they're not supporting their team in a way that their team wants them to show up, or whatever. That is much easier to coach and provide some skill development on, right? And I mean, that's my job, right? So like, of course it's easy for me to like drill down and say that. But I think too often there's this gap between, I'm getting this feedback that I'm not connecting well with my team, or my team feels like I'm not leading them well, or my EQ isn't where it should be, or whatever it is. And obviously, like, there are assessments and things like that can help with that. But I think if we really just like break it down to, these are learnable skills. It's things that if you practice these skills, it will increase your ability to connect with others in a really positive way. And I think it's kind of unfair to give a leader feedback that it's not clear enough what they need to work on, right? So I think you can give them the feedback, but then I feel like if we're giving leaders feedback, we need to be drilling down to actually support them in making positive change.
Agreed. So we went through the first couple ones. I want to review the third one real quick. The third one is presence can elevate EQ. Again, we spend a pretty good amount of time talking about that, but I just want to reiterate that presence is really all about removing all the outside noise to where you're focused and listening actively to the people around you, whether that's one-on-one or it's in a team meeting, that you literally are there to learn and grow and show up. So,
well, and I think it depends, right? Situationally, because I think removing the outside noise may not be possible, right? Depending on what kind of environment you're in. I think it's acknowledgement of the environment, right? Acknowledgement of the environment, acknowledgement of your distractions, being intentional about minimizing your distractions and being able to focus on what's happening. And this is also, I mean, this is it's more than just one skill, right? Because it's the ability to focus your attention. It's the ability to actively listen. There's a lot of things that go into that. But I think it's also, people are much more forgiving when you're transparent with, I'm working on this, right? This is something that I'm working on, and I'm committed to getting better at this for you so I can serve you better. And maybe even asking for some accountability. So Chason, if you see me reach for my phone, can you just politely, like, maybe tap your pen 3 times as a reminder to me that I said I wasn't going to reach for my phone in our meeting, right? And then it kind of becomes a little bit of a fun game, right? Like, then, I hear you tap and I'm like, shoot, did it again. Put $1 in the jar.
Put $1 in the jar. My wife has this thing because I'm losing my hearing and I have a propensity to start getting excited and not realizing how loud I'm getting. So she just puts her hand on, if she's next to me, she puts her hand just on my shoulder, my leg, whatever. Yeah. And I know, okay, this is just this random act of touching me. Like, okay, I'm basically shouting at someone. And, but it's that same kind of thing. Like, are you being intentional? So I love that change. Yeah. That's actually a very good point. It's a really good point that there could be things that you just can't help. I was in a meeting with someone yesterday morning and their phone rang and they apologized and they were like, I am so sorry. I'm just going to text them real quick. And my goddaughter, da, 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 da. And she said it and she did it and she turned it over and you could see, look, I want you to understand I'm here. I set this meeting up. I want to talk to you. But I appreciated the fact that she was transparent. I've got to do this. So, yeah, well, absolutely.
And you mentioned something that I think is really important too to call out, Chason, is we all have different ability levels. We all have different lived experiences and things like that. So you mentioning, the fact that you are losing your hearing a little bit. And so you have kind of that external trigger to help you navigate that. I had a coworker in the past who was hard of hearing, I believe in his left ear. And so in meetings, he would position himself in a way so that he could hear. But nobody else knew that. So I think if you can even acknowledge that and say hey, I would prefer to sit on this side when possible because it allows me to be engaged better. Or, hey, if you don't mind, I would prefer not to sit facing the window because it makes it harder for me to pay attention to you because I get distracted by what's happening outside. So just being honest about I'm going to try to put myself in the best position to be present with you.
So I'm going to go through and just tackle these again real quick for everybody. Yep. So the first one was EQ is comprised of learnable skills. You want to hit the touch points on each one of these as I go through?
I mean, the main thing there is just acknowledging that this is something that you can improve, and there are skills that are related to that. We talked about some of them: active listening, compassion, empathy. And I have to just throw this in really, really quickly. Compassion is so tricky because compassion really starts with self-compassion, which is really challenging for most of us. And that's all I'm going to say about that. We can do a separate session on compassion. I just want to acknowledge that. And presence, which we've talked about a little bit before. And there's more skills, right, that go into that. But I just want to acknowledge that if we can drill down into what are those skills that I need to improve on to improve my EQ, we're going to be a lot more successful in that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Then 2 is EQ is more than talking about feelings. So we just kind of run over that, but bullet points that you wanted people to remember?
I think the main thing with this one is similar to the first point, but just acknowledging that specifically for leaders, like this isn't just having a conversation about feelings. It's paying attention to what's happening with your people, with the people on your team, but it's also I'm not going to talk too much about like business outcomes, but trust me, there are a lot of positive business outcomes that come from focusing on EQ and not just thinking about it as like talking about feelings.
Perfect. Number 3, presence can elevate EQ.
I feel like that's been the majority of our conversation.
We did spend some good time on that. Yep.
Yeah.
And then number 4, EQ is an elevator to enhance relationships personally and professionally.
Yeah. I mean, that pretty much sums it up.
Pretty much sums it up.
Yeah.
So, oh my goodness. Brand new house. That's funny. Grateful for everybody coming in as we wrap up tonight. Short segment, but man, powerful. 4 things to remember about EQ. We talked about, we just highlighted them again. The incredible wisdom again from Sheena. So grateful to have you in the house. Give it up one more time. Thank you. Thankful to have you in the house. Thankful to have you as a friend. Thankful to have you on the board. Really appreciate all the work that you do. And I love this conversation. And anything else that you want to share before we say goodbye to these fine people?
The only thing I would share is I'm all about like actionable steps. So I would just choose one thing that you want to change to improve your EQ.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Thank you whenever you joined, or even if you're watching this and you're on Team Replay. We love you. Hit that subscribe button if you're not subscribed. Help us get over the mark. I believe today we hit 2,400 subscribers and we hit 80,000 views. Way to go, people. We appreciate you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for showing up. And thank you for being part of creating actionable change. This is another session of People Community Events brought to you by HR for You Incorporated, the Hounds of Business Community, and my buddy from Rockstar X, Joel Felsenstein, in the house. Love him to death. Love what he's doing. Different, not less. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great evening.